I've always wanted a rocket lawn chair. Hey folks, I'm Joe, this is Same Name Different Game, and welcome to the end of the summer of the 100 Mega Shock. And to finish things off, I'll be looking at the first game in the last major series started on the Neo Geo. A series that, by all rights, should not have been nearly as successful as it was. Why not? Well, let's dive right in with a little history on Metal Slug and the team behind it, Nazca. Nazca was a company formed entirely out of Irem expatriates who were fed up with not making more games. This aspect is about all that's been truly confirmed about the company. When asked about this in an interview with Retro Gamer magazine in their January 2012 issue, Kazuma Kujo, now of Granzella, said,
"It is true. Nazca was founded with around 15 employees from Irem.
Prior to leaving that company, the future Nazca team worked on several shoot-em-ups there. A couple games in other genres, but from what we know, mostly shooters. And while some of these are well regarded, like Armed Police Unit Gallop and Air Duel, the one best known now, and the one that really shows the attention to detail found in Metal Slug, is In the Hunt, probably due to its ports to the PS1 and Saturn. But after their final game for Irem, Gun Force 2, known in Japan as Geostorm, a game now largely viewed as a test run for Metal Slug, they were done waiting around for their bosses to let them make more games and struck out on their own. And for them, making games on the Neo Geo was a natural fit. Kujo says,
"We were making games for game centers, or arcades as you call them, when we were working in Irem. So that is why we made games for Neo Geo at Nazca, since that was the hardware of game centers."
I suspect that the relatively low cost of Neo Geo arcade machines, as well as the maturity of the hardware, factored in as well, though Kujo doesn't actually cop to any of that. In any case, let's get started with Metal Slug proper, starting, of course, with the Neo Geo original. Who besides Kujo is on the team is a near mystery. We have a lot of aliases, including the primary designer, Me/Her, but the only names we know for certain are Kuzo and current Platinum Games employee, Atsushi Kuroka, who admitted on Twitter that he did programming for Metal Slug. What we do know is that Nazca knocked it out of the park with this first game. Following the unlikely success of Metal Slug, they were absorbed by SNK on October 1st, 1996, according to the Game Developer Research Institute, who is citing an article from Japanese magazine Game Machine. But I suppose I'm getting ahead of myself. What is Metal Slug? I suspect that most people who watch this show are at least passingly familiar with the series. But Metal Slug is a side-scrolling run-and-gun action game. Think Contra, but more cartoony. In fact, the cartoonish nature of the series is one of its selling points. The art and characters have so much, well, character. There are a ton of little moments that aren't necessary, but give the game the sense that the creators really loved what they were doing. I think my favorite of these is the guy getting sucked down the toilet. And the developers clearly knew. In a 1999 developer interview with Nazca designer Miher, translated by Schmublations, he said this.
We really fussed over the details of the mechs, but the thing we probably paid the most attention to was making sure all the characters felt alive and that it would feel like they really inhabited that world. Metal Slug is known for featuring an abundance of character animation that has no direct relation to the game, but that's why we do that. We hope players feel like all the different enemies, big and small, have a life of their own.
And that feels like at least part of the game's enduring legacy. I've said before that I think the mid to late 90s feel like the peak of sprite art to me, and Metal Slug sure does a good job shoring up my case. But a great looking game doesn't necessarily make for a fun one. Fortunately, this one is also a ton of fun, and it's breezy to boot at only 6 stages. You take control of Marco and Tarma, members of the Peregrine Falcon Squad, out to stop General Morden's rebel army with only their wits, some big guns, and, oh yeah, the titular Metal Slug tanks to help them. The game features 4 gun power-ups: the heavy machine gun, the rocket launcher, the flame shot, and the shotgun. The most common is the heavy machine gun, which is honestly a big help because changing which direction you're firing will allow it to shoot on an angle, at least for a moment, something that you can't normally do in this game. And that was a conscious design decision. Kujo said in that Retro Gamer interview,
I like the fact that the central characters, the soldiers, can only shoot directly upwards and not diagonally. We spent a lot of thought on this, and I believe this is the way to do an action shooter.
This makes the power-ups, found in either crates or the boxer shorts of hostages. Yeah. Anyway, they are so very important. In addition to the fact that your standard pistol doesn't do much damage, the rocket launcher homes in slightly on enemies. The flame shot is a very wide shot, as is the shotgun, with the shotgun doing the most damage by far. But it's truly where the Metal Slug tank shines, as its Vulcan cannon can fire in any direction. The player also gets 10 grenades to start each life, which do a lot of damage, and those translate to shots from the Metal Slug's howitzer, which do even more damage. The 6 stages feature varied locations, from a canal to a snowy mountain, and blasting your way through them, especially with a friend, is still a ton of fun. Though you might notice that in this footage there's less blood than you remember. Well, this is one of those games that fell victim to the anti-game violence hysteria of the 90s. And outside Japan, the MVS defaults to changing the blood to, I don't even know, sweat, I guess? Or maybe it makes all of Morden's troops into androids from the Alien film series. At any rate, while it is the default setting, you can turn the blood on in the soft dip switches. Now, I said before that Metal Slug had an unlikely success, and that is true. By April 1996, when the game hit the MVS, the PlayStation and Saturn were already on the market, and by year's end, the N64 would be as well. But Metal Slug struck a chord, and it would get 5 more installments on the Neo Geo alone. An old genre with 2D graphics, up against the shiny new 3D hotness of the age, and yet it still got ported to the major systems of that generation. So let's start with the April 1997 Saturn release. Actually, strike that. Let's go back just one step to the July 1996 release of the Neo Geo CD version, which actually did have an addition that carried over to the other ports. The Combat School mode. Basically a time trial, going stage by stage at first, then unlocking a survival mode that challenges you to make it as far into the game as possible on one life. This mode also makes the normally limited special weapons infinite to balance things out a bit, and seems to completely remove the tanks. And the Saturn version, requiring the system's 1 meg RAM card, is basically identical to the Neo Geo CD version, including the addition of an ending vocal theme, Hold You Still. And since it requires that RAM card, you know it was a Japanese exclusive. As I've discussed at length in past episodes, the Saturn was already on its last legs in North America by 1997, with Bernie Stolar declaring it not our future in the late summer of that year. Still, for Saturn owners of the time, it was an extremely faithful port, basically an arcade-perfect one, since by now other home systems had caught up to the Neo Geo in terms of power. No compromising like with the Sega CD or Super NES. Even now, playing this on Saturn is a cool experience, if a slightly unnecessary one given the ubiquity of this game on more modern hardware. And 4 months later, in August of 1997, it would get a release on the PlayStation as well. This one was ported by a company called Ukiote, who, again, did a pretty faithful job. They even seem to have eliminated some of the slowdown present in both the Neo Geo and Saturn versions. However, because of the PlayStation's limited RAM, the game features mid-stage loading, which is a little bit annoying. But it is mostly, again, a nearly arcade-perfect experience, also including Combat School, and even adding one more thing. After beating the game, the PS1 port unlocks a new mode called Another Story. Another Story is basically 4 minigames. It's honestly not much to write home about, with a simple shell game, a game where you take cover in an enemy tank to sneak out of their territory, and a couple more. It's a fun distraction. There's even Another Story 2, featuring a new perspective on the events, but since I can't read Japanese anymore, and there aren't any fan patches I'm aware of, I didn't get a ton out of it. The PS1 port does appear to lose some frames of animation, but not to the point that it kills the character of the game. The silly stuff like the toilet guy and the dudes who run out of the boats to work the bilge pumps are still there. The hostages have all of their very charming animations, and of course, so do Marco and Tarma. They just have fewer frames in some cases, but not enough to really damage the experience. This one also remained exclusive to Japan, which is weird for a few reasons. First and foremost, because Metal Slug X, the improved re-release of Metal Slug 2, did get a PS1 port that came to English-speaking territories. But also because it raises the specter of Sony of America's alleged anti-2D crusade, something I've spoken about before and still have yet to find any substantiation of. The only industry person I can find who's on the record about this remains Victor Ireland, who, to be candid, had an axe to grind. And you'd think if this was a real policy, someone from Sony's past would have gone on record by now. But they haven't. At least not that I can find. So, yeah, it seems weird, but there really isn't a lot to say about these because they're so close to their original source material. And actually, let's go ahead and explore that as we do like we always do, and take a look and a listen side by side.
Mission 2, start. Okay. Thank you.
Flame shot. Rocket launcher. Rocket launcher. Okay. Thank you. Rocket launcher.
They all look pretty similar, though as I said, the PS1 game drops a few animation frames. And, well, the music is the same. So, I guess either the Neo Geo original or the Saturn are the best in this case. And that makes it time to give the edge. And obviously, it is the Neo Geo original, which is readily available on current gen hardware via Hamster's ACA Neo Geo Archive series. But if you want that combat school mode for a little extra challenge, you're going to have to seek out the Neo Geo CD or Saturn version, which can be a problem because the Saturn version is now commanding north of $100. But never fear, as that mode is also in the PlayStation version, and if you want to get a taste of that Another Story mode, you can also do it there, and that version is pretty affordable, primarily as a download for PSP and PS3, at least for now. And anytime Sony wants to make those playable on PS4 and PS5, that would be fantastic. Fortunately, discs are also not that expensive. You can get a disc of this one for $30 to $40 on PlayStation. And normally, that would be it, of course, but this is the finale of the summer of the 100 Mega Shock, which means we are now going to go ahead and take a look at where SNK, and specifically their Neo Geo, went from here. The second arcade boom, started by Street Fighter II, was beginning to see its end as the 90s came to a close. And the Neo Geo being impressive but dated hardware meant that it became easy to emulate, to say nothing of piracy on bootleg multi-carts. After a failed attempt at a follow-up, the Hyper Neo Geo 64, SNK faced bankruptcy and were purchased by purveyors of gambling machines Aruze in 2000. Under their watch, a handful of mostly disliked Neo Geo games were released, and the Neo Geo Pocket Color was likely sent to an early grave. But like a phoenix from the ashes, in 2001, Rikichi Kawasaki founded Playmore, who bought back SNK's IP from Aruze and became SNK Playmore. And support continued for the Neo Geo, while simultaneously releasing their new games for other systems like the PS2 and original Xbox. The Neo Geo soldiered on until 2004, when the final release, Samurai Showdown 5 Special, hit the MVS. The system had an active lifespan of 14 years, from 1990 to 2004, a feat matched only by the Atari VCS, Wii, and PS3, near as I can tell. After that, SNK began using other companies' arcade hardware, like the Sammy Atomiswave system, as well as the Taito Type X2 boards. But enterprising homebrewers still make new Neo Geo games to this day, as is the case with most retired game systems, I suppose. And SNK has made no bones about re-releasing their classic games on new systems, in compilations, as downloads, or even in special editions with PS4 discs inside classic-style Neo Geo shock boxes. There are few fan bases I can think of that are as passionate about their system of choice as Neo Geo fans. And I think a big part of that is that, while everybody else had moved on to 3D, SNK was still making beautiful sprite-based games. For those of us who love pixels just as much as we love polygons, this was really the only way outside of handhelds to get those kind of games in the 2000s. Mainstream console manufacturers and the third parties they contracted with, by and large, just were not doing that. But SNK was there. Yes, of course, with new installments of their big fighting franchises, King of Fighters, Samurai Showdown, but also with other classic genres, more Metal Slug games, and Sengoku 3 rules. If you've never taken the time to explore the Neo Geo library, there is no time like the present. And that was the summer of the 100 Mega Shock. But do come back next time, because I'll be looking at another 100. The 100th episode of Same Name, Different Game. And I will finally be covering my favorite game of all time. See you then. Hey folks, it's Joe. Thank you so much for watching me talk Metal Slug. First things first, shoutouts to Hot Cider and Mike Levy of Dongled and Dude You Haven't Played This Game for their voices. Links to both of their channels are in the description. If you like the show, please share it with your friends and do all the normal stuff, like, comment, subscribe, ring that annoying little bell icon. It really does help the channel grow. If you really liked it, consider supporting the show on Patreon or via YouTube membership. For just $1 per video, you get early access to new episodes, the chance to vote on polls about upcoming videos, your name here with these cool people, and more. In the description are links for merch, including the shirt I wore in this episode, one-time tips via Ko-Fi, and affiliate links to small businesses. If you missed any of the Summer of the 100 Mega Shock, the playlist is on the left. And if you want more running and gunning, Roger's look at Operation C is on the right.